All right, Tuesday, all kinds of stuff going on in both the financial and crypto markets as well as across the NBA and NFL. We got NFL free agency coming in fast and loose. And later we will draft a couple teams on Underdog Fantasy because I've gotten the bug drafting these playoff NBA basketball teams. I believe it was last week when I drafted my first one. I'm now about 30 deep. So we have gone down the rabbit hole all today on the club. All right, we got 133 million, 3 years, 3 poop emojis, figuring out his camera situation. We got Clay, we got Andy. Andy, how are you doing?
I'm good. I feel like there's a lot going on in the sports world right now, which is kind of fun, between basketball drama and football free agency, and then crypto's having itself a little bit of a day the last couple days.
So not to mention, we got March Madness kicking off this week. It's like I used to associate like this being the dead period, right, of the off season. It's like Super Bowl's over, Combine's over. It's just the lull before the NFL draft and the summer and all that. It's like I feel like things are just as crazy as they've ever been right now.
Yeah, it's I like really haven't followed college basketball that much this year because Villanova's not very good. So I'm gonna have to do a little quick deep dive into things.
I did because the past 3 previous Marches, other than like the COVID year, Lauren and I normally will go like on a trip in mid-March. That's when we kind of can get away. And so I haven't done like a lot of March Madness stuff. But because I was around this year, I used to do this March Madness draft, and it's just points. And so you just draft all the available players, and almost similar to like Underdog playoff basketball, you're just trying to kind of correlate teams you think are going to go far. And so I bought this like sheet that had a cheat sheet projection for points, but then I'm like frantically Googling players' names. I'm like learning like, oh, this guy isn't going to play in the tournament and all this stuff. So that was my crash course primer on March Madness last night. I also was checking out Peter Jennings, who I believe just joined the stream here, talking about March Madness over on the Unabated YouTube stream. Pete, how you doing? Win baby.
Ashley's getting induced on Friday, so either today, tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, and if it's Sunday, Ashley will not be happy. So hopefully that's not the timing. But sometime this week, it looks like. Hopefully St. Patrick's Day.
I was going to say that was the same with Lauren, where we had set like an induction date because she went past, and then she ended up going into labor like, I think it was like a day before she was supposed to be induced. But it at least is nice to know you have a set time where it will come to an end.
Yeah, not to get too into it. Was she showing any signs before the induction date, like Braxton Hicks contractions or anything like that? And
not really. Happened? That's why we're kind of like, oh, I guess we're just going to go into the induction.
Wow. Yeah, well, yeah. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, stoked to be with you guys. Baby news is fun, and hopefully everything goes well. But there's a lot going on in the world. I'm eager to chat some macro stuff, and it'll just be fun to chat through everything that's going on.
Jack, do you want to explain for the people who don't get this reference to the Lamar Jackson tweet? Was that today or was that yesterday? I can't even remember at this point.
That was like a couple hours ago. I guess it's been a long day. Yeah, Lamar is pooping on whatever offer is allegedly out there or is being reportedly allegedly out there. I'm actually more interested in the fact that Josh McDaniels spoiled Darren Waller's wedding and then traded him 10 days later. That's the news story we should be talking about more.
What was he? Yeah, because I remember Darren Waller got married a couple weeks ago. What was
to Kelsey Plum, who plays for the Aces. So they're obviously creating a little family in Vegas. Now, that can't stop you. The NFL is a business. We know that. But apparently McDaniels posted or said in like a press conference about them getting married before the wedding, and like they weren't planning on publicly announcing the wedding. So there's
like at the Combine said it.
Yeah, at the Combine. So the love triangle of the Patriots, Raiders, and Texans has been extremely entertaining to watch. They just pass their trash in between each other. And I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think Aaron Rodgers is worth 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers? Is he worth letting him just absolutely like manhandle your franchise, force you into signing these washed up trash players? Or would you rather let like Lamar Jackson control the future of your franchise? I'm very curious. Like, I get the Rodgers appeal. It's 1 or 2 years, but now like the baggage, the headache, it's just like shocking. The Jets are so desperate, but they're desperate for this guy. I don't know.
Yeah, because at this point, like you can't tell me Randall Cobb is better than Braxton Berrios. Like it's like I don't even buy that too. So it is like how far do you let the I don't know what it'd be, like the nepotism just like run through just to get this deal over the finish line? Because of course Rodgers is going to try to get everything out of this he can before he agrees to it.
Yeah. I mean, and the Rodgers defenders like Chip Skylark will say all the guys he wants are cheap free agent, like all this stuff. And not that Lazard's a bad signing at that price point either, but it's like, where is it worth it? In the NBA, to get Kyrie and Durant, like they had to bring in DeAndre Jordan for a year. Okay, that's worth it. But I don't know. It just feels like embarrassing. And not to mention, if he truly hasn't committed, it's completely stalled all their free agency plans. Like they couldn't make any moves yesterday. Their first move in free agency was signing Lazard. So I don't know. We'll see.
Clay, how are you doing? I know you and the Knights are cooking up big stuff here for March Madness. Is that where all your attention is?
Yeah, all day. I'm trying to max out all 24 hours this week. But it's good, man. We're having a blast with it. The app's been a lot of fun. People enjoying the bracket so far. We're running back our Degen bracket challenge this year, and we're giving away a 2024 VIP Final Four experience, plus a big Degen prize pool, and then offering a really fun form of no risk, no loss game type with our stake to play tournament. So you just simply put your Degen in, you'll get it all back at the end of the contest. And we have prize pools associated with everything as well. So we're hyped. We think that, it's been a great kind of foray into like what we're building out a lot further. And, brackets are a lot of fun, and it transcends even like sports fans as well, which is cool. So having a blast. If you haven't checked it out, check out our website, Twitter account. And then I'm gonna try to cook something up for our club VIPs too. So stay tuned. We'll be dropping something in Discord as well.
Does anyone have any hot takes for March Madness? Any teams they think are undervalued? It does seem like a super wide open tournament with the 1 seeds being pretty weak this year.
I don't. I'm similar to Andy. Carolina was so bad. I mostly only watched Carolina basketball this year and nothing else, and that got pretty disappointing at the end of the season. So I think I'm gonna take some flyers. A lot of upsets. I like UNC Asheville over UCLA. 15-2 is my spicy pick. That's absolutely absurd, but just for funsies. And then I think I might go full oppo and bet Duke to win it all. And that way, if they do win, then I get some financial upside from it. And if they lose, then I just get the enjoyment of them losing. So I kind of got convinced on that from our guy, Justin Herzig, yesterday on Spaces. I thought it was a pretty sharp idea he had for me. So I'm gonna have to follow through on that.
Pete, where's the value in the March Madness markets right now?
I wish I knew. I've been betting more games and totals just strictly off line shopping. That's one of the things I haven't followed college basketball that closely, but watched a little bit of Virginia with my dad and have a small sense enough to be a little dangerous. But when trying to make money, I'm just looking at the lines, and there's been a ton of opportunity in the first stretch of time here since the brackets were finalized. Just shopping for prices because the markets have moved quite a bit, and it's been great. More on the totals than anything else.
Is there like a macro trend in the totals, or just line shopping in general?
Just line shopping in general has been what I've done.
Yeah.
One thing I wish I had more time for is but a trend I've became more aware of this year, and definitely want to keep an eye on for next year, is like the value between some of the lower seeded teams being like more powerhouse teams just because of how the tournaments shake out. And often there'll be some opening value just from seeding differences, where if you were to remove seeding from the equation and you just look at the teams head against head, there's often a difference in line value from my understanding versus how it comes out on the odds from the tournament capacity as well. So that's something I'm gonna tune in more for next year and try to find some edge.
Andy, I just looked it up. I was curious. Are Andy's Villanova Wildcats in the tournament? Did you know you guys are playing in the NIT tonight at 9 p.m.?
We're a 1 seed though, so
Damn, y'all actually accepted the NIT bid? That's tough.
yeah, I don't feel good about it. I won't be watching.
I mean, what I did see that stuff about UNC. Was that actually considered poor form to turn it down like sour grapes, or was it? Do teams turn that down all the time?
So, yeah, there's a lot of pearl clutching about it, but I think that's a little bit more of the kind of Southern hospitality angle of being polite. Fuck it. I don't think we should have accepted it at all. Like, it makes no sense. You gain nothing. It's been a tough season. Like, the best case scenario is you go win the NIT tournament, and the people are just going to shit on you for winning the NIT tournament. So for those guys that had a brutal year, like, go get good in the offseason. Hopefully they come back. I would welcome any of the players back next year with open arms. Let's get it right and go forward. But no, I'm so happy we skipped that. I thought it was just silly conversation that there was an obligation to accept an NIT bid. Like, nah, it's a good thing to do, but it's not a necessity.
And the risk of if you then enter it and don't win, then it's
that's what I'm saying.
more
No
embarrassing.
upside.
Yeah.
It's like LeBron in the dunk contest, like, would it be great to have him in there? Sure. But does it make any sense?
Yeah, it's like you're already the first team that was ever the preseason number 1 to not make the tournament. And so it's like
we need to go high with our tail between our legs. That's the situation.
There's no winning that narrative war. Like if you win the NIT, it's like, oh great, you beat up the kid in the wheelchair. Like, congrats, you got something out of it. Yeah, I totally agree that they shouldn't have accepted it.
Yes, Daniel. After this season, we are scared to lose. That is a fact. Yeah.
Yeah, tough season for the Heels. What other than the Rodgers stuff? What is we've had a lot of free agency news today. Rashad Penny to the Eagles, Darren Waller to the Giants. Any other like low key moves that you guys are excited about? I'm pretty excited about Rashad Penny on the Eagles.
I mean, yeah, isn't he just the best running back on the Eagles now?
Yeah. And Miles Sanders just even had a tweet where he basically was like, "Thank you, Philadelphia, for everything." It sounds like he's good as gone at this point.
Yeah,
I like
what a brutal position to play in the NFL. I mean, you come in as a rookie, get a rookie contract. Those are your best years, and then it's time to get paid, and you're most of the time washed, which is just so brutal for these guys. I mean, Austin Eckler is awesome, but I mean, if I was the Chargers, I'd probably try to trade him and get picks and draft a running back instead of paying top dollar.
Yeah, Jack,
I love Austin
that's
Eckler.
your boy. What do you think Austin's going to do? Is he's going to force his way out of Los Angeles? Or are they going to figure it out?
So I've been anti-team running back for like years now. And when we started having some of these guys on the podcast, we would always say like, never pay a running back except Austin Eckler or except, the guys that we would have on. And so now I guess it's playing out that the GMs have seemingly caught up. I mean, Dalvin Cook is a cut candidate. I saw they're restructuring Kamara as well. It just makes no sense. Like why you would pay one. Now, if there were running backs to pay, it would probably be a 3-down back like Austin. But even then, it's like he's going to want to get priced even as like a low-level receiver potentially, get Lazard money. It just never makes any sense to pay them. You just draft
Alan Lazard money.
Yeah, get that Alan Lazard money.
It's so sad when Eckler's a better receiver than Lazard.
Well, that's the thing is why, the Le'Veon Bell thing, Le'Veon, he thought he was going to reset the market, and he actually kind of just exposed that, we're never, even a 3-down back who's dynamic is never getting money. So, I hope Austin
to a certain extent, he did reset the market a little bit.
He did.
Right?
He didn't do it how he thought he was going to do it. So, I mean, for Austin's sake, he's on a really good team, exciting team in LA. He does a lot of stuff off the field. So, like, I don't want to see him necessarily go to, like, Cincy or Buffalo, like, from that perspective. But from a pure football standpoint, like, I don't know who pays him. I don't know if running backs are going to get paid anymore.
Well, and the thing
I
for
feel
fantasy oh, go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to say, I feel like at some point, I feel like right now we still get a lot of the best athletes in the NFL become running backs. And I feel like that has to change. Like a guy granted, sometimes they're smaller, but if you have a running back who's like 6 foot, 220 pounds, really fast, strong. Like you could be an outside linebacker, man. Like you can figure it out.
It's because it used to be like the sexy position. It's like you're the star running back, you score 20 touchdowns. If you're the best, you get paid. And now it's like you don't want to be a running back.
And we learned about CTE and knee injuries.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and the thing for Eckler too is it's hard to imagine a better fantasy spot than Los Angeles. I mean, you have a good quarterback who's willing to check down. They don't have a lot of other weapons. He has the goal line role. I mean, the only one I saw floated that would have been interesting is if the Bengals let Joe Mixon walk and then trade to get Austin Eckler to just be their new Joe Mixon. That would obviously be very fun. But there are like, you can go down the list and it's like Chargers are better than that spot. Chargers better than this spot. Like,
but are the Chargers? They had an awful rushing attack last year, and that was not Eckler's fault at all. Like they were up 20 in a playoff game. They couldn't even run the ball. So is that your argument for saying it's a good spot because he catches more passes because he can't run the ball?
Well, yeah, because his fantasy value has never been really tethered to him being a super efficient rusher. It's his goal line role and him just catching a shit ton of balls.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. The Chargers, like if they lose Eckler, and then I mean they've already talked about them being so tight against the cap, potentially, doing something with Keenan, cutting Gerald Everett. Like they need someone other than Mike Williams and Joshua Palmer on this team. I'll tell you that much. Pete, anything else interesting for you on the NFL free agency front? Anything moving the needle for you?
The Broncos just keep getting owned by the Seahawks. Other than that, yeah, I mean, it's been a interesting stretch so far. I mean, I think the draft this is one of the most compelling NFL drafts. I thought the Carolina trade for the Bears made sense for both teams. I don't know how much you guys have talked about that, but I like that trade for both sides. And keep in mind the big thing that I think teams should be positioning for is Caleb Williams, someone I really respect. Thinks Caleb Williams is the best quarterback prospect of all time. So, yeah, so that's not hype. This person's not hyperbole.
Who is that?
He's USC's quarterback. He won the Heisman last year. He's fantastic, but that's obviously a statement.
That's a huge statement. This is not someone who uses hyperbole. I watched a ton of him, and his arm strength, his accuracy, he runs only when he's like he's a pass first guy, but he's super electric as a runner. He's huge and he's young and he won the Heisman. Like certainly one of the best prospects I've ever seen. I'm not trying to say he's the best I've ever seen, but someone I respect.
It's so interesting because he doesn't like profile as what they used to look for, like the 6'5" pocket passer. Like he's got a really strong arm, but it's not the strongest. Like there's nothing that he does that's like superstar to me besides like intangibles. Like that's actually where Caleb feels like is his best trait. He's definitely a consensus one. It'll be interesting to see this year. Like if it feels like if they don't win at all or they don't at least dominate the Pac-12, like maybe others could get involved, but he's a beast. He played at Oklahoma. So when I was down there a couple of years ago for the Texas game, they were down like 3 touchdowns because Rattler stunk, and he came in and just took over the game.
Was he like a better prospect than T-Law was?
No. Lawrence is like he's the best prospect in the last 10 years, which is why this statement is really interesting.
Yeah.
It's also just like go ahead.
No, I was just going to say like consensus is he's right. I mean, I think Lawrence had more hype, but he's right there. The person that I would also point to that I was really high on going way back, Pete, I think I lost a bet to Davis Maddox, was Andrew Luck, who was more of the prototypical kind of number one pick. But Caleb's movement and accuracy, I mean, his stats were ridiculous. 42 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 66.6% completion percentage. I mean, he was awesome, and he's super young. That's the thing that I think is intriguing about Caleb Williams, is that he did all this at a really young age. And we'll see. He's only 6'1", which is not ideal, but he could still grow a little bit. If he ends up 6'2", 220, 230, that's more than fine. And I just think it's relevant for a lot of these trades and these moves that teams are making, because just like there's a lot of good quarterbacks this year, getting that number one pick next year is super valuable.
Yeah. It's also just a reminder, though, too, of like how much stuff changes, because it always happens with every draft class. Because 2 years ago it would have been like JSN is going to be a top 5 overall pick, like the greatest wide receiver we've ever seen, and then it's like injuries happen and stuff changes. It's just like football's such a cruel game too, that like even confidently projecting stock like a year out can be very tough.
Jennings, do you remember that bet? Like, what was the other side of that bet? Because Luck went number 1 in that draft. You said you had it. You remember the bet with Davis?
It was RG3, right?
Yeah, I think RG3 was 2. I had a bet that
Yeah.
Luck would win a Super Bowl. I think I might have even had over 1.5 Super Bowls with Davis, and then
Damn.
he retired. But kudos to him.
Yeah. I mean, Luck was still playing as one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. He just decided that he no longer wanted to play.
But just, I mean, I get it. I mean, the beating that these guys take is just crazy.
Yeah. Jennings, do you have any number 1 draft tickets overall?
For what do you mean?
Like number 1 overall pick for the draft. Do you have any tickets for that?
I don't have any tickets for that. I would guess Stroud for sure at this point in time, but I know that the market thinks that as well. I thought he was the number 1 quarterback coming in. I wish I would have made a bet, but yeah, because he was like what, minus 150, minus 200. And now last I saw he was like minus 475 or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any tickets?
Healthy. No,
I don't have any tickets, but I DM'd Josh Norris, who obviously hosted the podcast with McCown, because my gut was that there's no way this information is moving off of their podcast, like just their podcast. So it seems like obviously Carolina wants Stroud, but I messaged Josh and I was like, this isn't like locked by any stretch just because McCown wants him, right? And he was like, no, of course not. Like he is going to have a say, but like, so maybe other quarterbacks could be live, but
Panthers might trade out that pick too. They got options.
It sounded
very. Carolina could trade out.
That was the report. They said that, and it felt very Niners-esque when they moved up. And they were like, oh, we actually don't know who we're taking. We just know we want to be in this general vicinity, which I think is interesting in that it does show that it's maybe a closer tier up at the top and that there isn't one definitive top prize at the top of the class.
I mean, like Richardson's the top guy. Like,
right. But you
just
get
play
him much
for
later,
upside.
theoretically. Yeah.
Can you though? Like
I watched the
war. Like he might go 4th.
No, Richardson stinks. He's awful. He can't throw for shit. But like neither could a lot of quarterbacks who we've seen. Like Josh Allen couldn't throw 2 years into the NFL. So if I were a GM, and I think Rudman actually tweeted about it, which I agree with, GMs don't play to win Super Bowls. They play to not get fired. Like the large majority of them, which is why I wouldn't draft Richardson. As a fan, who would I want my team to draft? I would want to draft Richardson because I think that the best opportunity is he turns into, like, if he turned into Mahomes or like a similar level, would that shock anyone? I don't think so, given his physical tools, but given obviously his bust potential is through the roof as well.
The funny thing is, though, on the conversation of GMs, just fighting for their own life and the incentives not being aligned, like a GM, I think to me, I don't think you should be able to justify benching Anthony Richardson, but say like the Seahawks take him and they just sign Geno Smith, like that GM can still extend their window, right? Be like, we're going to give 2 years for Anthony Richardson to develop and then trot him out there. And he's been cashing checks for those 2 years while still making the ballsy pick.
That shit doesn't even happen anymore. Like no quarterback even makes it through I guess Lance, right? I guess he was the last.
The Chargers weren't going to play Herbert until Tyrod Taylor got hurt.
Right. But there's always like turmoil and injury. Like over the past 5 years, those guys get a chance. So maybe you could last a year, but like 2 full years with Richardson sitting on the bench in never, like would literally never happen.
Well, the Panthers have nobody right now as quarterback, so
yeah.
Jordan, they got nobody on
years.
Who did? Jordan Love? Yeah, that's true.
But obviously that's a totally different circumstance with Aaron Rodgers in front of him. But he looked awesome. Remember Aaron Rodgers got hurt and then he looked awesome in those couple drives. Anthony Richardson, I played a ton of college football DFS. and we were always higher on Richardson than the field. And it was like the epitome of boomer bust. I mean, he'd go for like 50 fantasy points, just looks unstoppable, running down the field, like incredible. And then some days you'd need him to do anything, and he'd get like literally 1 fantasy point. Like every drive was like 3 and out. He'd scramble around, take sacks, try to convert like a third down, miss guys by like 5 yards. It was just like,
so what
I
you're
couldn't
saying
tell if
is
he was good or bad.
You prefer him in best ball, Pete?
He's a very good best ball player. He is the best ball. He's like the absolute perfect best ball pick for sure.
All right, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the markets. I guess we could circle back to SVB, but Andy, what do you think is causing today's big crypto ripping? I mean, I had my classic Andy post, went and had to check the price, and I was like, holy cow, good price.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's one of those things where anyone who says they really know is probably lying. But I mean, I think in general, there was a bit of, I guess, in situations like the big banks collapsing in the way that they did, there's like a bit of kind of existential unknown of like, what if this happened? And like what would happen to crypto. And so like with the example, and I think USDC is like a good example of that, of like what would happen to USDC if multiple of the banks that it banked with shut down. And I think like that causes a lot of fear when it starts to happen, but the fact that USDC is still alive and kicking as of now probably brought a lot of certainty into the market in a lot of ways. But then alongside that, I think it also, like, this whole thing happening, even though everyone was bailed out, just like kind of reaffirmed why crypto is something people care about in the first place. Like CZ from Binance tweeting about how they're going to spend $1 billion from their treasury and put it all into Bitcoin because they don't trust stable coins anymore. And I don't think that like while that in and of itself is probably like performance, whatever, I don't think that like the entire sentiment is incorrect. And now you have a bunch of people in tech who maybe have previously shit on crypto or not been super open to it, who now have like a very real life experience of like why people are excited about it. And so I think it was just very affirming of a lot of the same kind of beliefs that a lot of people have had for a long time.
Pete, what has been do you think the crypto rebound is directly tied to the Silicon Valley Bank fallout and people having a little confidence in how that situation was handled?
Well, I think there's so many factors at play, and this is like, I love this stuff. There's just a bunch of angles that you have to take into account. So obviously we have all the banking stuff, and then we have, the Fed stepping in. And I think we can talk more about that, but I think the way that was handled was actually really well done. I've been very critical of Biden and this administration, but I think the way they handled this was really well done. It's not perfect. I know there's some people who probably got bailed out that didn't deserve it. The bankers themselves and the bondholders, the equity holders, that's going to go to zero. So that should be fine. But broadly, depositors getting made whole is good. And I think we would have seen like real panic if that didn't happen. So I'm happy that came to fruition. In addition, we had really interesting stuff going on with rates, which is correlated with the banks. Yesterday was the biggest one-day drop, I think, since 1982 in the 2-year treasury in terms of bips. It was almost 100 bips that went down. So I think a big part of what we're seeing in crypto, and then even today in like the NASDAQ, at least initially in the part of the day, was that there's a pricing of rates coming down. So I think that's another factor that's really important. And then I think the biggest thing for Bitcoin and crypto in general, the most killer use case has always been be your own bank. And I think kind of the most recent events have made that storyline more compelling than ever. So I think it's a lot of those factors. I think the Binance thing probably plays a short-term role. The ability to kind of move these tokens around back to some of these other parties, I think is another factor as well. So there's a bunch of things that are impacting the price, but yeah, there's so much to unpack here. I don't know where we want to go.
Andy, did you have any other takes on the SVB stuff as it pertains to kind of crypto?
I mean, it was pretty crazy just like how fast it all unwound, I feel like. Thankfully, a lot of my friends and founders I know who did have money there have all generally been fine. They were able to get it out through the backing and everything. I saw that Silicon Valley Bank sent out an email that they're back open for business, which I thought was like kind of crazy. But no, like, I mean, to be honest, when it comes to a lot of the stuff more around like rates and all of that, I'm really not an expert in that by any means. I try to stay with some amount of understanding of why that's important and all of that, but it's certainly not my area of expertise.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just for people who haven't been following this closely, Pete, can you give like a very TLDR on what led to this collapse and what like were the parallels to this in the 2008? Because people are benchmarking this as the second biggest banking collapse in U.S. history.
Okay, yeah, I love this. So going back to 2008, we had a huge financial crisis. That actually was the result of just a bunch of bad behavior. And essentially, I think the biggest thing that got a lot of press was the mortgage-backed securities. Anyone could go out and get a mortgage. All that stuff ended up being toxic debt. That put the banks in a really bad position. Then some of the banks started to fail. When banks start to fail, that can cause societal chaos. People can't trust that their money is safe. That can lead to a lot of problems. So the government stepped in, and what happened in 2008 that I think was really harmful and that a lot of people have resentment towards is that the bankers themselves were bailed out. So a lot of these companies were in a good position even after they made all these egregious errors kind of leading up to the crisis. And a lot of them were made whole. A lot of them got to keep a ton of their money. It was just kind of a bad precedence to set. So fast forward, I think we need to go back to COVID to kind of understand what's happened. So COVID happens, and that's a really, really troubling thing for society. We know we have this pandemic. We're going to have to shut everything down. And initially, if you guys remember, this is when prices just fell off. I mean, Andy, I know we've talked about some of this. Like, I think you're at a critical point in your career and you're just like, oh no, like what happened? Like everything's tanking. Obviously, the pandemic was very concerning. So the central banks around the world came together and kind of said, hey, how can we help the situation and install confidence in society for people to continue to work, even though they're going to be stuck at home? And the solution was to, basically flood the ecosystems around the world with a ton of liquidity. And by doing that, that stimulated the markets in a huge way. So that's why we saw kind of what transpired from, 2020 through, end of 21 into early 2022 was all this liquidity being stuffed into the economy. That liquidity went into stocks and different assets and all these different people and into, loans and all sorts of things. So a lot of people got relatively wealthy on paper and had all these assets appreciate. And of course, that leads to inflation. So, we start to have some inflation. There's some real signs that there's a lot of inflation going on. And I think the big mistake that the Fed and other central banks made is they continued to have this really loose financial policy. And that led to even more inflation, which they said was transitory, which obviously it wasn't. So we get into 2022 and it becomes very obvious that we're having this sticky high inflation. And that is a huge problem. That is something that is really hard for central banks and governments to kind of resolve. If you have high inflation, it's really hard to get that to come down. And that's a big problem for society for a lot of reasons. It's really tough on the middle class. It's really tough on lower income families. Like those are the people that get hit the hardest, and the people who can absorb inflation are the wealthy. So that's a real problem. Now the government's trying to fight that. Now the Fed's trying to fight that. And the main tool they have is raising rates. So the government goes out and the Fed goes out and raises rates, and they do it really aggressive and really quickly. And that obviously is, put risk on assets in a bad place. We've seen kind of the economy come down, which is what they want to curb inflation. But one of the other consequences is what it does to banks. And this is what happened to SVB. And this is what's happened to a lot of these banks is that when they get deposits, go out oftentimes and either loan that money out or they go buy treasuries. And in both cases, when they loan the money out or they go buy treasuries, most of the time they're doing long duration loans or bonds. And those long duration loans and bonds have low yields, especially from 2019 through 2021, when interest rates were effectively zero. They have these low yielding long duration bonds. Now we get to the point where we are now, and especially SVB Bank, they're correlated with crypto, they're correlated with venture. All these people need the excess cash that they have. So they're withdrawing a lot of the money. So that put pressure on the bank because they don't have those deposits sitting in liquid cash. They have them in all these long duration, low yielding bonds. So their choice then is saying, okay, we need to raise cash. They need to go sell their long duration, low yielding bonds. When they try to sell those are going to come in at a much lower price because all bonds end up converging at the same yield. So most bonds are yielding 5%ish right now. So those bonds are yielding 2% over 10 years. The only way they can yield 5% is for the price of those bonds to come way down. So all these banks across the country, they all have these long duration, low yielding bonds that are worth like 75 to 90 cents on the dollar. So if forced to sell, they actually don't have the deposits that were given to them because they had to sell these assets at a loss. So that's really what happened to SVB Bank. That's what would have happened to a lot of these banks if there was a run on regional banks across the country. And that's why I think it was so important that the Fed stepped in. So it's not a bailout of like the actual equity in the banks. It's a bailout for the depositors, which I think is really important because if you lose faith in, your deposits and money, like we can see crazy stuff in society. That's where I know there's been a lot of hate and different things about like J. Cal and some of these people saying like, go buy guns and stuff. But I don't think it's like super far off. If like people don't trust that their money is safe, like people start doing some crazy stuff. So I think it was a good action. And I actually don't really blame the banks that much because they don't really have much of an alternative. They should have hedged their bets better, but the alternative to the long duration stuff is short duration bonds. And those bonds were actually yielding negative rates or close to zero during that time from 2019 to 2021. So this policy, the fiscal and monetary policy, really put the banks in a bad place. And, the rise in rates ultimately broke something. So I think now the question is, what are they going to do with rates? I think that my view is that they'll probably stop raising rates and ultimately they'll go a little bit down. But what does that mean for inflation? Because that's still a really big problem that we could face. I'm sorry, that was long-winded, but
no, the chat appreciated that, as did I. One other question I had, and this is like circling way back, why did so many startups and tech startups all rely on this bank specifically? I still haven't been able to quite understand why this cohort of companies all had exposure here and then other bigger legacy businesses didn't.
So I can give a little bit more color here as far as like crypto companies go. It's really hard to get a bank account as a crypto company. Doesn't matter how much money you raise, doesn't really matter what you do, doesn't matter how reputable you are, it's very hard to open a bank account. A lot of the traditional big bank accounts will not work with you. And so it means you generally have to work with these smaller banks. The ones that we've seen most people work with are like Mercury, which is our primary banker. Silicon Valley Bank, Signature was a really, really big bank as far as taking on crypto. And so it's just a lot of these banks that weren't quite in that upper echelon who were, slightly more comfortable on the risk profile of banking crypto companies. But it's interesting because I think some non-trivial amount of where the blame has been put on this for banks, especially Signature Bank, who they even came out publicly and said that they were a hit job against crypto, which I thought was really, one of their board members did. And so it's interesting because that was just like who people could bank with. So it's, it gets progressively more and more challenging as a crypto company to open up a bank account and do all that stuff. And it seems like there's somewhat a narrative going on in the press painting some of this to be blamed on crypto, which is just like not what happened. And I don't totally know. I mean, I have a pretty good idea of why they're doing it, but I don't really know what grounds they have other than just like spreading misinformation, which is too bad. But so, yeah, I think they were, more traditional tech startups, probably it was just easy. The name makes it sound like a bank you want to work with if you're working out of Silicon Valley. It was just like kind of the ones that I got introduced to. Fortunately, we didn't end up banking with them, but I think generally if you're a tech startup and getting need to get a bank account and all that, they're one of the 5 who you get intro to from your first investor.
Yeah, and I heard a lot of personal stories from people talking to about even like the personal finance side with like individual mortgages and stuff. Like they were often the bank that would be the only one to grant mortgages for houses and stuff to people, especially in the crypto space, who like would get turned down by traditional banks because on the financial sheets or whatever, it wasn't up to what they thought was a valuable company or a bankable company to get a mortgage for. So there's like a lot of interesting sides of the coin here, and I'm continuing to get email updates from like partners that we work with who you're talking about. They had money on the platform. Like it was wild to be on calls the day that this was all going down, and people in real time getting messages like, holy shit, we got to get millions out of this bank, and like dipping off of calls like in real time. Quite the whirlwind experience. But yeah, I mean, they kind of go deep from both the personal mortgage front and also business side.
Jack, did the SVB stuff bleed into your world at all?
Yeah, I got a bunch of emails from companies that I work with, I'm invested in. On calls, it kind of got brought up as well. It definitely impacted. I think what people don't realize is how many people it could have impacted, which I think to Jennings' point is why it was so important. And almost the fact that it happened on a Friday or Thursday, but really like more so mainstream Friday. And then it went into the weekend. And then by the weekend's end, it was solved. We're in this echo chamber on Twitter, and everyone on Twitter was obviously joking about it, talking about it, having conversations about it. But like the people I spent time with over the weekend had no clue about it. And so if it had gotten to the point where the bank truly failed, didn't get backed, people lost hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, I assume it would have been a major disaster, which once again, Jennings is talking about the nuance of like all the different factors. In theory, at first glance, you would think that if the banks failed, that crypto would explode, right? This is the thesis for it. But also, if the banks failed, then everyone would have wanted their cash. So they would have taken all their money out of all investments. And so it's interesting to see crypto's reaction to, everything that happened. But crazy shit, that's for sure. Like, once again, because it kind of happened on the weekend and got solved by market open for the most part, I don't think it fully like hit people and they realized what happened.
So Pete, from like a bigger thing, because I feel like that's been a topic of conversation like on the show over the past few years of like, where's the best place to have your money? Is it getting exposure to crypto? Is it just being liquid? And one of the times used to be just having cash and being on the sidelines. And now you can't even say just having your cash in banks. It's like the safest place to be. So like, where is the safest place to put your money right now?
Well, the safest places to put your money for a long time has always been just in like treasury bills. The problem with putting money in treasury bills over the last 10 years up until, last year and into this year is you weren't getting any yield on your money. So you're locking up your money to essentially not get yield just for the safety of being in T-bills. And of course, T-bills, if the government doesn't pay, then we're going to have a lot of problems. And that's kind of what the whole world is based on is, the US dollar is the world reserve currency and the American government. But that broadly is the safest place to put money. And I still believe right now, gun to my head, something like that. Or I guess if you're going to get more extreme, like gold, water, food, shelter, like you can start playing that game. But broadly, if you're looking for a traditional place to park capital, that's probably the safest play. And it's attractive right now because those rates are so high. And to me, the actionable advice, I actually gave this on the Lucky Trader space today, that I have high conviction in. And I don't even care. You can take this as financial advice, I guess. And I know that's not what you're supposed to do, but diversification is your friend. Like diversification, and I'm not actually giving financial advice, but like diversification is what I think right now makes a lot of sense. It's a very uncertain time. There's so many things going on. And I think if you're a founder, you want multiple bank accounts, you want to diversify your balance sheet. If you're an individual trying to protect your family, I think diversification across real estate, treasury bills, crypto, whatever, like just figure out what assets you want exposure to and then have diversification. It's not a time where you want to just be like really concentrated with your capital. But going to just a little bit farther back to the conversation, like Jack mentioned, if this wouldn't have been resolved, this is a problem that almost every single bank has. And what would have happened, and David Sachs talked a lot about this, which I know is getting a bit polarized right now, but really what would have happened was there would have been a huge distinction between the big banks, the too big to fail banks like JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Citibank, and regional banks. And everyone would have just flooded to the big banks if they would have let SVB fail, because all these other regional banks have literally the exact same problem. They all have long duration, low yielding treasuries. They all have all these mortgages out there. An easy way for you to think about this, or for most people, how many people do you know that have a really great mortgage out there? You know, a 2.5%, 3% mortgage, where it's like, oh, that's such a great deal. Like rates are 5%, and I have a 2.5%, 3% mortgage. Who's on the other side of that trade? It's regional banks. Yeah. So all these banks have these assets that are worth a lot less. Now, they can still make their depositors whole if they can hold those assets to maturity. And that's another distinction and something that I learned more about over the weekend is that the regulations and laws around this are actually really, really bad. These banks actually don't have to disclose or mark their assets if they just say, hey, we're going to hold these to maturity. So they can say, I have $100 billion of hold to maturity assets, and they're actually worth a lot less. So hopefully that's something that will change over time. And that's something that David Sachs has also talked about. Like, how are founders and these people supposed to read these bank balance sheets when we don't even get transparency on like what they actually hold? We just know that they're holding these to maturity assets. So I'm really happy that they resolved it. And it is a big problem. And that's what I think is interesting going forward is, you know, the Fed figured out a solution. They're actually paying for it out of the FDIC insurance that all these banks have paid for. So that's really good. It's not the taxpayer immediately that's paying for it. Ultimately, I do think it'll be the American people that pay for it. But this is a problem across all these different banks. So to me, the answer to make those assets worth more is rates come down. But if rates come down, I think we're going to continue to fight pretty sticky inflation.
All right. Well, Jennings, thank you for giving us that explainer. I know it's even as someone who read a lot of articles about it, there's still nuance that can get lost. So I appreciate all of that perspective. You know, one way to diversify your money is to make it rain at a strip club. It sounds like Ja Morant. I mean, is he done for the season?
It's really weird. I mean, granted, I know nothing more than what's been like publicly tweeted, so I'm certainly not a source of information here. But what's been interesting to me is seeing some of these reporters, like Mark Spears had a tweet about it or mentioned it, and I saw it tweeted maybe from NBA Central or someone. And it seems like there's this like kind of wink that's happening from a lot of reporters where it's like, I know something, but if I say it, I'm the asshole, and so I'm not going to say anything. Like basically Mark Spears was like, there's something I wish I could say, but I'm not going to. And like, I've seen that from a couple different people, and it's really weird. So I certainly have no idea. But it seems like things have escalated pretty quickly there. I wouldn't be shocked if he was done for the season at this point. There's been a ton of conversation and something that Jennings mentioned last week about his drinking and stuff like that. But I don't know. I feel like this is the first time I've seen something like this in a while. This like wave of new like superstars has been so buttoned up compared to previous generations, and now with the way the internet is and stuff, it's kind of unprecedented.
Jack, this feels like a source story that you would be breaking the news on. I mean, where's the deal? Where's the scoop?
He's done for the year, but like you said, no one wants to be that person, because I honestly, like, I'm a huge mental health person, and so I always am going to default to there's something wrong with him that's a little bit. Obviously, it's his responsibility, it's his fault, but if you understand mental health, it's not. It's maybe out of his control, right? And so I'm always going to default there. It's why I kind of was in favor of Simmons until we got all the facts. At this point, you know, Ben is probably in a different category, but throughout that whole process. So yeah, I would have, I mean, the reaction was like, this is a PR move. This is, you know, the internet is obviously going to say what they want. But if like if you want to talk about it from a fantasy or betting perspective, just avoid that.
Yeah. And I mean, Ryan mentioning in the chat here too, Wiggins, Ja Morant, Karl Anthony Towns all look unlikely to come back. LeBron and Durant hurt. The West is wild right now.
Yeah, I don't want to get off the Ja Morant thing, but the Andrew Wiggins thing is also really weird. I mean, I've literally no idea what it is.
Yeah, no one seems to.
It's been kept really, really close to the chest it's one of those things where it's been so secretive for so long that it must be just like really fucking bad. I have no idea.
The jaw thing is that like I find the most interesting is like we're not talking about a team that's like out of it. Grizzlies are what, still second in the West, third in the West.
Yeah.
I have like the last standings, but like that's I think the really interesting kind of wrinkle here, and kind of the biggest tell that there's something a lot bigger going on. Because like you think about everything that's happened in sports, right? And not to say that any of this is the way things should be or whatnot, but like how much shit just gets kind of like overlooked or pushed through under the premise of like winning in a championship. And when you have a team that is like poised,
he didn't hurt anyone. I mean, yeah. Well, I guess he might have allegedly.
That's all relative, right? But like, yeah.
No, I'm agreeing with you. Like, it's not. If the worst thing the kid did was, he's worth 200 million, he spent 50 G's on a nice buffet at a strip club, like
it's not
that seems like it seems like the lightest thing. So there's obviously something. That
happens every road game. Like imagine if we got all the video clips of like Harden, going to Atlanta and pulling up a little baby like on the Rockets off season. Like this is nothing new. I think the new part is definitely like how it's being handled both from like his team's perspective. And there's a lot at play here. Like even consider like he just launched his first signature sneaker with Nike a few months ago. The playoffs will be a huge marketing moment for them. So like Nike has a lot of stake in the game. The NBA, he's one of the brightest young stars. They have a lot of stake in the game. So I think it's nice to see that, if you're taking the rosy kind of glass point of view here, it's nice to see him seemingly getting somewhat protected, people trying to look out for his best interests, at least from optics from afar. However, it is a little complicated to think through. Like, it's hard for me to kind of like be like, yeah, why would he not come back this year at some point? Maybe he takes the rest of the regular season off, comes back to the playoffs, whatever it may be. I don't know. I just, first and foremost, I want Ja to get right and hope he has still a great career going forward, because he's by far one of my favorite players to watch.
Yeah. The
bottom's spicy, man.
What's that?
The bottom of the playoff bracket is spicy. Like Grizzlies, kind of frauds. Kings, they're not going to go far. They're a great offense, have no defense. They're not built for the playoffs. Nuggets kind of doing some injury stuff. They're on a 3-game skid. But you get the Lakers healthy, they sneak in there. Luka comes back healthy.
These are the questions I need from you guys, because I've been blasting off on these playoff basketball teams. I know how to correlate teams, but I need you guys to tell me who are the sleeper teams that are going to sneak in, because people are drafting LeBron and AD together pretty aggressively in these drafts. I mean, guys like no one's getting drafted on the Thunder, like Shea Alexander.
They're done. The Thunder aren't going to make it.
They're not going to make it.
Like, can we acknowledge how great that was? That's when Pete is deep. When Shea, if you had gotten Gilgeous in there too, I would have been like, all right, someone pulled them.
I should have gone for it.
So you start taking a double Jalen Williams. That's how you really know.
My personal opinion on the bottom half here is, I still believe that New Orleans is actually the most dangerous of that 33 and 35 crew, which are like 4 or 5 teams. But Zion, once again, seems like he's not coming back. That knocks him out. The Lakers are playing really good basketball without LeBron since they made those moves. Like, they're dangerous. I wouldn't want to, I would still take the Nuggets over them. The Mavs are terrible. Like, they're just not good unless Luka's going to do what he did last year in the playoffs, which he obviously could. It seems like Minnesota is like the new trendy team, but once again, like, Cat might be out. But Ant's taking that leap. Gobert is garbage in the playoffs, but the rest of the squad's like pretty solid. The West, to me, it's the Warriors and the Suns, and it looks like, because the Clippers, the Warriors and the Suns could match up in the first round. And then have to play the Nuggets. Like, if you're in that 2, 3, 6, 7 slot, you're like very live to go to the conference finals.
If KD gets healthy, I'm all in on the Suns.
Of course.
Pete, I've seen you in some of the Underdog playoff basketball drafts with me. Are you already thinking about, like, are you going out of your way to avoid Suns and Warriors on the same team because of this projected matchup? Or are you not worrying about the bracket quite yet?
I'm thinking about it, but one thing that's interesting with the bracket, and you definitely don't want to stack this way, but a lot of times to advance, like you're going to need the team that gets 7 games in a series. So in theory, some of the stuff to advance early on could actually be like a matchup where you get 7 games and you have players from both teams. Now that's not ideal going forward, but it's not like as devastating as football or something like that. And actually, the correlation in round 1 is super valuable. So I'm not like going out of my way. I still am trying to be really thoughtful about having like one big team in one of the conferences, and then I'm building a lot of teams where it's like I have like 3 to 5 guys from one team in a conference, and then I'm doing a lot of like 2, 3 or whatever, just making sure I get the best players, because the best players were wildly underdrafted initially, and now we're starting to see them come up, like Kawhi, Paul George, Anthony Davis, LeBron. Trying to think.
Even the Sacramento Kings guys,
Edwards,
who
even
are
the
gonna put up
Kings guys,
serious
Fox.
points in that first round.
Yeah, Fox, Sabonis, and the Kings are better than people realize, I think.
You get AD and LeBron
We'll see.
like the last like 3 rounds consistently forever. I don't know if that.
Yeah.
Spacing.
I think one of the interesting things for the NBA best ball right now is really just, and I haven't done too many recently, but the shifting in the, like, both conferences are so different, where I really feel like in the West, a team who plays in the play-in tournament has a legitimate chance of being in the finals, whether it's the Warriors slip, the Lakers, like those are real teams who will be live in the playoffs. And in the East, it's like the top 3 is just so good that I have a very hard time seeing it not be the Bucks, Celtics, or Sixers. And so it's like they're very, very different conferences that I think you have to like kind of play in very different ways too.
Yeah, and I was like, you mentioned Edwards. Like, one thing I've been running into with my limited NBA knowledge is like Edwards is the only guy on Minnesota that's really getting drafted in any of these. But like, if you're making a bet on Edwards, like, sure, he could, like, if they win a series, like, aren't you going to want a second guy on Minnesota? And so, like, I guess where for you guys are you willing to go, say, 3 deep, maybe even 4 deep on one specific team?
I think the Warriors are still underrated. Steph has started to climb. The Wiggins thing, we don't have much transparency on what's going on, but it's certainly feasible that he comes back, and I think they could easily make a run. I mean, they're in the championship they won the championship last year. They just got the blessing from Perkins, who said they have no chance. So that's almost like the Kramer reverse ETF. It's like, do the opposite of what Perkins says. So I think they're really interesting. I mean, you can get Poole and Draymond, and Clay goes a little earlier, but like you can get a lot of Warriors, which I think is great. I would be bullish on the Clippers. I just hate the Westbrook pickup. I think that's bad for their team. And that's part of the reason I'm bullish on the Lakers. I mean, the Lakers have played awesome since they got rid of Westbrook. He was clearly not a good fit. Anthony Davis is still one of the 5, 6, 7 best players in the NBA. LeBron in the playoffs, I think, could be dynamite. And D'Angelo Russell, who I've actually been kind of off him in general, he's having the best year of his career by far. He's just been absolutely dynamite as a shooter. And that's really what they need. You know, Vanderbilt's playing great defense. Beasley's a perfect fit, kind of like a 3-and-D guy. So I'm kind of bullish on the Lakers, even though I thought they were terrible and I shorted them to start the year. But now that Westbrook's gone, I think they're live. And then, Pelicans could make a run. They have a great team. I don't know if Zion will come back. I think the most likely players to come back in order is probably Wiggins 1, Cat 2, and then Zion 3. Cat did resume basketball activities, but I don't know. What's your guys' view on that? I mean, I think Wiggins is obviously the biggest wild card, but I would still probably take him coming back over those other 2 guys.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
I mean, if he plays, he's really good. He's a really good player.
Yeah.
How are you guys handling the East in these drafts? And then we'll hop in one of these to wrap up, because I feel like it's fascinating. I realize, like Mikal Bridges is like the only guy getting drafted on the Nets. Are they just like a sitting duck in these? Is that why no one wants to touch them?
Yeah, they don't really seem to have a lot of long-term prospects. Like, you got Mikal, Spence, but like Claxton has really fallen off recently. They play their starters a lot, but they don't have the star power where they're getting drafted, and it doesn't seem to like they're going to have. I mean, the odds of them making out of like the first round are, I would say, lowish, depending on where they finish with the final seed, and then second round seems highly unlikely. I kind of like, what are your take on the Cavs? Like, Jennings, you into them at all? Because like, to me, they're the team. Like, obviously, I agree with Andy. They're the top 3 teams, far and away superior. I would put all the money on one of those advancing to the finals out of the conference. But the Cavs are low key constructed, I think, in a nice way. They got pieces. They have great big man presence. I think they match up well against a lot of teams. I think they actually create a lot of matchup issues for certain teams. Did anyone into the Cavs at all?
I I'm obsessed with the Cavs structure. Like Garland's a stud. They have a superstar come playoff, or like a player that can reach that superstar level. And then you got Mobley and Allen in the middle. They've always lacked like what Okoro should be. They've got LeVert who can score. Like,
I know, man.
For whatever reason, I mean, it's one of my secondary favorite cities, Cleveland. I'm like in Cleveland Twitter, so I see a lot of Cleveland shit. They've just been wildly inconsistent all season long, and like if you look at the chart right here, they're 15-20 on the road. The top 6 teams in the East all have like 3 to 8 game spreads on that, but they're insane at home. So come playoffs, and it looks like Milwaukee's now going to be the 1 seed. Boston seems beatable. Now Boston owns Philly, which makes the dynamic very interesting. And if the Cavs can get the Nets, they're 5-1 in their last 6, but they're obviously a very beatable team come playoff team. So could they beat Milwaukee? Like the way Giannis played last night, the answer is no. But Middleton's injuries have been weird this year. If Cleveland, it looks like they're locked into 4, but if they found a way to get out of that second round matchup with Milwaukee, I would love them a lot. But I love them to win a series, which I guess, they could win a series and then play 6 or 7. So having one of their guys, getting 12, 13 games out of them could be valuable.
The Cavs.
I love the Cavs. Go ahead, Pete.
I was just gonna say the Cavs and the Kings in these drafts seem like the best cost adjusted teams, because you can get all of their best players after round 3, right? Like Sabonis is the first to go off the board, and all of them are pretty easy to stack up. So I've been finding myself going to the Kings and the Cavs as my primary stack on one side in almost every draft, and I don't know if that's gonna burn me or not, but it falls
I think
that
the
way.
other thing too there is there's a high chance they play. I doubt they sweep anyone, both those teams, because they're young and inexperienced.
Yeah, they should play a lot of games.
Oh, that they go 7. Yeah,
the Kings in particular, because I've done some Kings stuff too, just mostly grabbing Sabonis and Fox. The Kings hopefully will have long series, which I think they will, and they're just going to be fantasy goodness. I mean, the Kings games are just absolutely nuts, and even in the playoffs, where scoring comes down and teams really load up with defensive game plans and efficiency goes down and all that stuff, I still think the Kings series are going to be fantasy goodness relative to the other series. So even if they lose in the first or second round, you could still get some decent value to advance.
And they're live to. So what do you do with a team like them who's super live to make the conference finals? I think they're probably we all doubt they'll make the finals. Can you have just a one-off player on your team that isn't in your final team? Are you comfortable just drafting Fox or Sabonis and then picking a Western Conference team to actually make the finals? Or if you're picking one of those guys, are you taking both and you're saying Sacramento's going to the championship?
I'm doing both strategies. I don't mind. And I'm only taking up to 2. I'm taking 1 or 2. And I just think that those are, like Pete said, really good values in terms of their points. And then the Cavs, I think, are, I'm really bullish on this team. I think they're 1 player away and just a little bit more maturation out of Evan Mobley, who I think is going to be a star in the league, from being a legit contender. LeVert, I think, is best when they need him to be more of a scorer and creator when Mitchell or Garland's out. But yeah, he can in theory be that 5th piece. Cedi Osman probably fits better in the playoffs as the guy that they'll probably roll with their main lineup. But I think they'll win their first round no matter what, or not. I think they're very likely to win their first round, and I think they can make a series in the second round. So there's pretty good value on the Cavs as well. But I think, Pete, you nailed it. The West is wide open, and then the East, you really want some combination of core of the top 3 teams. And if you're building a big West stack, maybe you can get away with some Cavs if you can grab a one-off from one of the top 3 teams. I don't know. It's tricky.
What do you guys have any of the deep one-offs that you'll do? Will you do a Trae Young, a Siakam? Or are you guys just completely avoiding that?
I'm staying away from it, especially Siakam. Siakam has been pretty bad since they got Jakob Poeltl. So I'm definitely staying away from him. if you were guard weak, I could see taking a flyer on Trey. But I think my biggest problem with that is I just like it's very rare that I find myself in the 9th or 10th round and I'm like, oh, I wish I had a couple more guards. Typically, I'm looking for a bigger wing.
I was
I have
thinking
zero
about points
Siakam,
upside.
and I think I've got Trey Young on 1 or 2 teams where I did end up like in a weird spot where I was because guard's pretty easy to fill, but I think let me just see here. You can check your exposure, right?
Yeah.
What about Miami?
I love Miami.
Really?
Yeah, mostly just as I don't think they are making the finals by any means, but getting to fill in the 2 best players on a team as a wing and a big is really nice.
How
I
late are
don't
they
think-
going? Like, where can you get Butler and Bam?
Butler is ADP 33. So what is that, like 5th round? And then Bam is ADP 44, 45. He's pretty low.
So here's a question for you, Andy, with that example with the Heat, because this is a spot I'll find myself in. Say I go heavy on like a Nugget stack from the West, and then I'm going to build out some secondary stacks in the East. And one of those is a Bam and Jimmy Butler team. And then I'm sitting there at the very end. I need one more guard. I know it's going to come from the East. Would you rather tack on Tyler Hero, or would you rather prioritize a one-off, say like a Trey Young, who projects a little bit better in round 1?
It's hard to say. I really don't know. I think if you felt like you needed, I guess it depends on whether or not you have 5 players playing in your finals game. If you already have, say you're going Heat like Suns, for example, if you have Butler and Bam, and then you have the 2 Suns guards and Durant, there you go. That's a 5-player finals. I don't think there's that much value in drafting Hero over drafting guys who are going to get you through those first couple rounds. And that's mostly based on like who won last year and kind of the team constructions that seemed like they worked the best. But I definitely do not know. That's just how I'm currently playing it right now. Is I don't really take, unless I'm just like getting the absolute nuts of a draft, I'm probably not taking more than 6 players in the finals.
Yeah. And I mean, and you can tell that the field is doing that as well, just the way the ADPs are, right? Like there's so many teams that only have 2 players, even the Mavs, like no one gets drafted other than Kyrie and Luka. I mean, I have to add, like, who's the big man? Like, is Christian Wood, is that dude just like undraftable?
Well, he's been getting a lot less playing time recently. Like I really was high on Christian Wood coming into the year. Jason Kidd does not seem to want to play him over the last like 2 months or so. He will, if he gets playing time and he starts, he's a great play. Problem is, like, no one knows what the fuck his like rotation schedule is going to be like in the playoffs, because he's been getting like 15 or 20 minutes tops some nights as well. And at that point, he's not a great draft pick. But I got to imagine they're going to play him in the playoffs. Just, hard to see.
Let's hop in one of these, and let's also get some more liquidity in these rooms. I'm sick of hopping in here and
what are you
needing to
gonna
wait for them to
see?
get filled. Influencer 101. Oh, friends and family draft here. Goodness.
Nice.
Right.
Let's go.
I'm drafting with Andy and Jack then.
I haven't done too many drafts out of the 3 spot.
3 spot's nice.
Yeah.
The spot that's tricky is 6. I think 6 is the worst.
What do you guys do you think the ADP is efficient at 3 with Tatum? I do see Embiid go ahead of Tatum sometimes.
Yeah, I think Tatum's the play because I think Boston has a much better chance to get to the finals than Philly.
Yeah, so that's one of the interesting ones because it's been slipping with Boston's recent struggles. I mean, they looked bad against Houston last night.
Well, they're not the
like
one
a lot.
anymore. I think that's the real key. Is like they're not the 1 seed anymore, so they got to play Philly. Now they own Philly, but Philly's playing really good basketball. You can't ever trust them. They seem to be the same thing every year, but they've got the best record in the NBA since December. So, they're looking good.
The biggest argument for Embiid too is
we do Tatum, Andy.
I think
positional scarcity.
Right.
Yeah, the positional scarcity for Embiid.
That's the biggest argument for Embiid.
Do you know what's crazy? Oh, I was just going to say, I'm surprised Giannis hasn't flipped Jokic in ADP, because I swear anecdotally every draft I do, except this one because Pete's a homer, Giannis goes 101.
I've been on the Jokic number one by far for a while. That's the positional scarcity stuff. And I think it's close. If you look at just the odds to win the conference and get to the finals, obviously Milwaukee's slightly ahead now and the favorite to win overall, but I still think Denver's in a really good position. Denver's been awesome at home, and they're going to have home court.
Who's your MVP, Jennings?
Joker right now, but it's getting close. Embiid
I like
and Giannis are both.
here.
Why wouldn't Giannis be the MVP?
He hasn't played. He's played the least games out of all of them, right? By like a decent amount, I think.
Is that like the new? Because it's moving a ton. Like I think Embiid caught a lot of steam, and then Jokic came back with, like, the narrative is swinging when on Twitter they start posting like Jokic defensive clips, which hadn't been posted for like 6 months. But
Kawhi at the 14, that's sharp. Kawhi and Paul George are moving, right?
This is a tough
everyone's,
here.
It's like Ayton or Sabonis probably.
Yeah, I think I would take Sabonis.
Yeah.
And I think the move is basically build out a 5-man of a repeat of last year, Boston and Golden State, and basically just take some more one-offs to get to 10 with a bunch of guys who you think are going to do really well.
Couldn't you get Fox and a 5-man of Golden State?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So you could kind of build like a.
Clay's having a low-key freaking fire start. The Durant Booker, I love that.
That one, not saying it's not fire start, but that one is very easy to get in drafts.
Yeah, for a stretch there, it was tough when before Durant got hurt. Now it's a lot easier.
One thing you did, Pete, that I like that I think people make a mistake is they'll do Jokic, Jamal, Aaron Gordon, 1, 2, 3. And I've been able to get Gordon coming back in the 4th because no one will want to take like a one-off Gordon. And so getting the D2 stud and then letting Gordon come back, that'll happen.
And
like
the
20%
and the bigs are valuable because people will start being forced to take bigs here.
Yeah. And I think that Brook Lopez is actually being a little bit underappreciated. Like if you look at, even with Giannis on the court, like his fantasy points per minute and just like the minutes that he plays, he's just good. like with Middleton not being 100%, I think he's their 3rd best player right now. Mm-hmm. And so Brook Lopez.
Well, he's been going off recently.
Yeah. He's been playing really, really well.
He's a huge part of the reason they're playing so well. Because he should win Defensive Player of the Year with or Jackson this year. I mean, I think Jackson was ahead. Now I don't know if Lopez is steaming because of the record. I haven't checked those award odds, but it should be one of those
enough. I think Jackson kind of had it on lock when the whole block.
So now this is tough. Like taking Marcus Smart here feels disgusting. I think my lean would be to either like take another one-off in like a Julius Randle or reach for Clay. Those would be.
I would go Clay.
I think Clay will come back to us here, right? Clay will come back to us at 27.
Hurry up.
I guess we're going to find out, right?
All right, I'm just going to grab Smart.
Panic, Marcus Smart.
No. It's over.
I love what you said. Like my last pick, I was thinking about that. I was like, I drafted Paul, but I was kind of like, no one's going to take Paul. I was going to take Mitchell instead. It still worked out for me. I got Mitchell as well, going guard heavy. But I had that same thought right before you said that, where it was like, yeah, probably should have detour for a stud to come back and hope that Paul falls.
He doesn't come back though very often, I don't think. But
so now Clay, right?
I strongly agree with Nez's comment that people don't think Lopez is that good because he's not sexy. It's a good take.
Dude, I hope that was music to my ears, Andy, because he is my highest exposure player through 30 drafts right now. Is Brolo.
Yeah, when he's on, they're on, man. Like he's got a shot, that's for sure.
He's also just like one of the few big men who can just like straight up play in the playoffs. Like a lot of big men have trouble. They're getting, the game slows down, but he's such a good defender and such an important part of that team. Way less likely that he's going to find himself on the bench during crunch time or big games.
Whatever team picks up Matt Ryan should be fined a 1st-round pick. It's
Oh,
just plain and simple.
We didn't even, speaking of breaking news, we didn't even touch on Samaje Perine to the Broncos. Did you see that, Jennings?
I remember I rostered him in college football DFS, and he broke the rushing record.
Is that
Sorry,
real?
And then Melvin Gordon broke the rushing record.
Dude, they're not gonna
And
let
then someone else
Javonte
broke it.
ball.
I like Perine.
All right, so Pete, what are we looking like here coming back?
So do we want to do De'Aaron Fox with this Sacramento thing?
I would say we either want Fox or we want to get one of the two Celtics big men to lock down our finals. But I feel like we can probably take Fox and then get the other Celtics big man who doesn't get drafted.
How close is it? I mean, I know Robert Williams, dare I say the Time Lord, is the far.
I think it's pretty close.
But it's close.
Yeah. Robert Williams is like the young, springy, athletic guy, but like when it comes to, especially in the playoffs, and this is just like a bit of bro science, I guess, but like come actual playoff time, Al Horford is just like such a savvy veteran who is just someone you can put in and rely on in crunch time in important games. I feel like he always gets a little bit of a bump. And also Robert Lopez just has way more injury risk.
Okay. But all things being equal, are you still taking Time Lord?
Yeah, all things equal, I default to ADP is like probably decently efficient, and so.
Yeah. Well, I think this worked out well for us. We can go Time Lord.
I think this is really nice.
I like your team a lot.
Yeah, so we got 3 Boston right now, Smart, Tatum, and Robert Williams, and then 2 West double stacks, Curry.
Can anyone in the chat
and Fox
tell me if they like Southeastern Missouri State or Texas A&M Corpus Christi? Starts in 50 minutes. Thank you.
Is this in the NIT?
No, the playing games start tonight. I'm on the Pitt Panthers tonight, and oh my god, that was nasty. Sorry, I'm watching a little Champions League. You guys know any footy?
No, until Underdog offers contest and forces me to learn. All right, Andy. So we do have Boston guards available and Jordan Poole.
I feel like those Boston guards are going to slip. Same with Poole. Like, I don't know. It's a kind of a gross spot.
Mm-hmm.
All right, A&M.
I think I'd rather have Andrew Wiggins than Jordan Poole, to be honest.
Really? Okay, so I didn't get it in time.
Really?
I think Poole is the pick there.
I do too.
Poole is going more.
The only
I agree. I like Andrew.
Positionally, it would have probably made sense, right, Andy? Because Wiggins gives us the wing, and then we would have been able to go.
Wiggins will come back to you.
Yeah. Did Draymond go already? He did, didn't he?
He did, yeah. For some reason, because Wakey was getting boxed out bigs, and so had to go Portis and Green.
That was what I was hoping we could get. That would have really gotten.
Would you want Bridges?
Yeah, I needed Bridges because I'm fucking shallow at wing right now. I need
so that's the problem with these Nugget stacks is I have Gordon, Porter, and Bruce Brown.
I think we just take Wiggins now. We're gonna have a pretty hefty final stack, but he's just, in my opinion, probably the best player available.
Right. Because then the only other consideration would it be if there was like another 2-team stack we wanted to build out, right?
Yeah.
Your team is so
Anthony
sexy.
Edwards
I
is
love
already
that.
done. I definitely, probably my biggest concern with a team like this is just like in our world of a Celtics and Warriors finals, having Robert Williams be your big man just terrifies me.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, the best pick in the 2019 draft.
Wow. I wanted to get Jack's take on this because the Knicks are getting expensive in these. Like Julius Randle's a popular pick. Barrett is going in every draft.
RJ Barrett's like quite literally one of the worst basketball players I've ever fucking watched in my life. Like
wow.
As someone who like watches, like I've watched a lot of basketball in my life. He's got to have like the lowest IQ I've ever seen from a basketball player at any level. Now, from a fantasy perspective, he puts up gaudy numbers because he doesn't stop fucking shooting. even though he's like one of the worst 3-point shooters in the league. So I mean, if you guys aren't taking third options on like Sacramento or some of the other teams, I don't know if I would necessarily take Barrett. He has been rebounding and assisting, like those numbers are up, but also because Brunson's been out a little bit. I don't know. He's so bad. But the Knicks are still, I'm still betting against Jennings round 1. We're gonna dub.
Okay, we should have a little prop bet, a little something fun.
Yeah, we will. Once the matchup gets locked in.
Who are the other big men left other than Towns and Adams? Is there
Cat,
anyone
Adams,
there you can-
Gobert, Kristaps, Claxton.
Adams seems like he's that was not good news that we got the other day. Out for the rest of the regular season.
Yeah.
Looney had 4 dimes yesterday.
Honestly, I think with
Some
this
insurance.
team, taking Looney isn't awful.
Yeah, it actually
Just because
I agree.
there isn't really
I-
much
I-
else for us to take here that feels good.
And
Well,
it like
because-
if you're building that team, yeah.
Okay,
Right, 'cause
here's a
we're-
question
we're
for you
live
guys.
3 finals. Yeah.
Look at my team. This is a tricky one. Would you take Trey Young or Grayson Allen? Like totally opposite type of picks. I got 5 Nuggets. I got a lot of nice one-offs.
How many bucks
I don't
do you have?
1.
Just Brolo.
Trey.
I have 5 Nuggets and a bunch of ones.
Trey.
See, this is the spot I'm always wondering about.
You want upside?
I would go Grayson because I don't think the Hawks are going to be locked in to.
I like Grayson too because I like my team. I like Trey though. Trey, I've taken that's the spot where I've taken.
last round
Trey,
flyer. Like, what do you lose? when
Beautiful
you lose?
draft.
Like you have the
This
upside.
is a good one. I really like your team, Pete, and Clay. You had a great start. I
Yeah,
don't
they
love
got a
my
little
team,
tricky,
but-
and I didn't love how I finished out, but that's a fun start. I mean, I'll be pulling hard for the Sun, so
Yeah,
I like that
feel
strategy though, of like one anchor team on the conference and then piecing it together from the other conference.
Just best
That was my
players.
strategy. Yeah,
I feel like I've done way more builds like Pete, where I'm super heavy on one and then a bunch of one-offs. And so doing this team that Andy and I just did that's concentrated on just 3 teams feels
I love that.
fun and different, at least to me.
That's been my biggest style up until now. Is I've been doing, and I try really hard to just kind of go with whatever I'm given. But I find myself a lot doing like a 3-3-2-2 or like a 4-3-3 or something like that to try to be a little bit more opinionated about the finals outcome and hopefully have a little bit of a stronger team in the finals. But like when I do teams like that, I kind of try to stick to the rule of like only draft a player who isn't that good if you like kind of have to.
Right.
Like
It's a pretty efficient draft. Everyone has pretty decent teams. I think TTP probably has the least strong team, but that 6 spot's just tough. I mean, I hate Kyrie at the 18, but
TTP
Yeah.
down here is say Christian Wood's undraftable, apparently.
yeah, I like D'Angelo Russell though. That's someone. So he was getting undrafted. I have some teams of LeBron, AD, and Russell. Like, I think the Lakers are dangerous. And I've been the biggest Laker bear.
Would you place a future on them?
Probably not because they're still inflated. I'd have to go look at prices, but like people love the Lakers still.
Yeah.
And a foot injury for a player like LeBron is not ideal, but I like the way their team is constructed.
I heard he's got a really
So
good
much more.
steroid guy.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that he's probably in Miami right now.
They're down to 50-1.
You remember when LeBron first got traded back to Cleveland and he played like 2 games and he just like didn't look that explosive and that good? And they're like, yeah, he needs some rest. He goes down to Miami and then he comes back and he's just like jacked and just looks awesome and like explosive. It's like, yeah, I wonder what happened in Miami for LeBron.
Wow, Andy Dalton to the
this is
Panthers.
Ridiculous.
Fuck outta here.
Like, what did they do?
are you serious?
Yeah.
No,
Why? What's wrong with that?
that's disgusting.
Max Dugan, first overall.
He's a
Andy
good-
Dalton, TCU Redheads leading the way for Carolina. I think that's a smart play.
Oh, dude, that's
Dalton's a good backup, I imagine.
Yeah, what don't you like about Dalton?
yeah. The problem is he might not be the backup.
He's going to be the backup.
I know.
Is Dalton better
Well-
than PJ Walker? I'll say it.
Yes. Is Dalton better than Derek
Stroud?
Carr?
That's-
No.
Arguably.
Definitely. Carr is super underrated. People,
Is
I think Carr's going
Is
to.
Darren Waller better than David Njoku?
No,
Yes.
not this year.
I think so.
Yeah.
Not the year 2023.
They're different kind of players, though.
Waller's
One
last
play-
season
one
was really
plays-
weird.
Waller's getting old.
And one doesn't.
Yeah, Waller's getting old. And Joki's a fucking stud.
Well, Pete, best of luck this week with the upcoming birth of your second child. Thank you for, if there's one thing you've always...
Can we get a bull run so I can do another hospital stream? Like,
Hell yeah.
I need
We're working
Bitcoin,
on it.
100K.
Andy,
Or
fire
I
the
need-
meme, baby.
I was going to
I
say,
need something to just pump.
you've never prevented the birth of a child preventing you from doing this show. That is one thing no one could ever say about you. Appreciate all of you guys hanging out in the chat. Fun show bouncing around to all of the free agency news, basketball stuff. I will say, I do think next week, maybe next Friday, I want to put together like a mega Underdog NBA playoff best ball stream show because I've gotten obsessed with these. Were you guys a little bit impressed with kind of my uptick in NBA knowledge during this segment?
How many hours have you been studying? That's the real question.
Oh, yeah. We were in like back-to-back drafts, Pete, and I was like, damn, he's drafting really well. It was like in the morning, I had Gracie around. Like we had some like Coco Melon or something on. I could sneak a draft, and I was like, man, Overzet's drafting strong over here.
You know, we're trying. But yeah, maybe I'm gonna try to put something together maybe next Friday, and we can continue to dive deep in that. I need more of you guys in these drafts so they fill quicker.
I know they're a little
high
slow.
stakes too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, let's get some kick the stakes up a notch.
I might need to refill my account from Underdog.
The 5 burgers and fries not going too well over there.
Yeah, we've been starving out in the streets. They say my account right now is a liken to SVB. So I don't know.
It's just all of his capital is locked up in long-term plays.
Are you still in that analogy?
Fucking, are you kidding me, Josh Okogie? Like, I mean, holy shit. I guess that's not the stock to be in.
One other thing I should mention, I did spin up a March Madness contest in the Deposit Kingdom Discord. Our friends over at Run the Sims are kicking in $500 cash prize pool, free prize to first. I'm kicking in some gift cards to the merch store. So if you're in the Deposit Kingdom Discord, check that out. I know Clay is going to circulate a Knights contest for our club VIPs, and there I'll also kick in some prizes for that. Any other plugs, anything you guys want to mention before we head out?
I mean, not to trump you, but we're doing $2,500 free to enter bracket over at the Snapback Pin Tweet. Pretty cool site we're working with, Byte Bracket. They're doing a you can fill out your algorithm. So you rate on a scale of 1 to 10. Like when you're picking in the tournament, do you value opponent points per game, turnovers, 3-point shooting, all that stuff, which makes me when I was going into it, I was like, oh, I really have strong opinions on this. And then by the end of it, I was like, I don't know, Ken Palm might do a pretty good job of quantifying all this together. So yeah, more free money for you people out there.
All right. I just joined the Snapback Sports server. I'm ready to take your EV.
Tomorrow night,
right.
6 p.m. Eastern, come join us for
Yes.
Twitter Spaces. We're doing a March Madness betting preview with Action Network on the KOD account. We got Jack joining, Tiki joining, Jerry Ferrara joining, special. Just got confirmation. Darren Rovell is going to make an appearance.
Oh boy!
Later in the evening.
Nice.
Oh boy!
So we're gonna have a lot of fun.
Wait, before we go though,
Yeah.
let's get a tourney champion prediction from everyone.
I'm going slightly chalk. I'm going to say Houston.
Okay.
I literally don't even know what the bracket is.
Just say Nova and the NIT, Andy.
Yeah, I think Nova's going to crush the NIT. Big NIT guy.
My Longhorns are a 2 seed, but we stink.
I'll stick with. I'll be a bit of a Big East homer. There's no way they actually win, but I'll go with Marquette.
Okay.
And,
All right, so we got Texas, Duke, Marquette.
No, I'm not going with no. Fuck no. My longer shot is UConn. I love the Big East. I think that they're actually the sneaky good conference. The Big 12 was the one renowned as the best conference.
Live. It's the most biased take of all time.
No, it lies in the numbers. It lies in the numbers. But every bracket I pick, I have Creighton making its decent run. I like UConn. I like Marquette also. But I think Houston's your best pick, and then I think Alabama's super live. So I'll go UConn just for clarity there.
it's fun when the Big East is kind of good again.
Yeah.
Make the Big East great again. Many are saying, all right, appreciate you guys all hanging out. Enjoy March Madness week. Good luck in your drafts. Good luck in your NFL free agency, Twitter battles, whatever you are doing. We appreciate you. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.